welcome to Season 2 of A Stab in the Dark. This is the retrospective series where we look at old horror movies and horror-adjacent films. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yes, genre films as they're called.
Genre.
A thriller or even a threatening sci-fi would be okay.
Threatening sci-fi.
What about a nice violent action film?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And yes, Dave is here.
Hello.
And Mike is here.
Yes, correct, he is. Hi.
And today we are covering...
Climax.
Well, keep it going. Keep going.
We're keeping this all in.
We're recording the whole thing like this. Oh yeah, we're getting camera movement.
You gotta get
High production. Yeah.
Keep that head moving.
Oh, let's get this back right. Salut! Right, let's do this. So,
Bonjour.
Climax. Bonjour. 2018. It's probably potentially our most recent one we've done. Perhaps up there.
Midsummer
Midsummer
19, yeah.
Oh, was it? Okay, then, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
maybe each season has like a really new movie to kick it off.
Yeah.
It seems.
There we go, yeah. This one will not be as long as Midsummer, though, which is
He says.
in at like
Who
4
knows?
hours. But well, let's go with it. So, Climax, Dave, look, let's get your initial thoughts on this film. And while you do it, because I'm paranoid, I'm just going to have a quick look at the old...
The framing of the...
Yeah. So,
Right.
go for it.
Okay. Well, I love this film. I really, really love this film. And honestly, like, I'm looking at my notes. I took about 7 notes because I couldn't take my eyes off the fucking screen
Yeah,
to pause
the
the
visuals
movie.
are
Yeah.
absolutely luscious, beautiful.
I do have a lot of things to say, but I find it so engrossing to watch. I mean, it's literally...
Well, it's hypnotic, I would describe it as. It's-
I mean, this kind of film is the kind of reason I like watching films. Like, really, I love it that much. It's my favorite Gaspar Noé film, which is probably going to turn off all the Gaspar Noé fans because they all think it's his most accessible film, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's his most critically acclaimed one as well.
Yeah,
Because it's the least polarizing.
Yeah, he's quite pissed about that, isn't he? He's like,
Yeah.
I did it in like 2 weeks.
He doesn't
and
like
it's my
making a movie that most people like. Yeah.
I love the non-conventional structure of the film. That's kind of a staple of his, isn't it?
Yeah.
The camera work is, I mean, like mind-blowing to me, and I don't work in film, but I have no fucking idea how the hell they did it.
Yeah. It's an incredible. I mean, all of his movies are basically shot in a very distinctive, interesting way.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily. This is a lot more Enter the Void.
Yeah.
than
Is that the one
his
where
other
you like
movies.
a ghost almost, or like
Yeah, you kind of like in a lot of it's a bit. What's his name? Who did Scarface and so on?
Al Pacino.
Yeah.
The director. where you
De Palma.
Yeah, it's very De Palma, and it's
Yeah,
moving
yeah.
from like room to room as if it's going through
Yeah.
walls.
That's it.
and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Because anyway, yeah. I think honestly, this is like the kind of film I would recommend to anybody to watch at least once, because it's such an experience, even if it doesn't work for you as much as it does for me. Like, I think it's such an interesting experience.
Yeah,
And
very
it's also-
visceral and involving.
It's also like the closest thing to watching an actual nightmare that you can actually capture on film that I've seen. So yeah, I really, really like it.
yeah,
I think it definitely captures like a LSD nightmare within
Yeah.
it, because you don't obviously see anything of what they're seeing, but you see them go from this sort of party atmosphere, having a nice time. They're obviously all fucking about with each other in this dance troupe, which is something that really genuinely happens in acting circles and things. There are certain theatres out there which have a lot of people, remain nameless for this one, but a lot of the actors fuck about when they're on like 2 months at a time in somewhere. They all sort of
Well,
Yeah,
I
mess
guess
around with
it's
each
like a
other
pretty
a lot.
closed off world, I guess.
well,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
It's one of those industries like when you work in a bar or a school or those kind of thing where you kind of spend all day together and you have your cliques.
Yeah, very,
and
very
stuff.
gets
intense,
incestual.
very intense
Yeah.
like period of time. Yeah. What did you think of it though, Joe? Because this is your first time, and I was really curious to hear what you think
And
about
I'm guessing
it.
you've never seen a Gaspar Noé.
No, I hadn't. No.
Yeah.
I don't really know anything about his work outside of this film, actually. Proudly French, this one.
All of them are.
Yeah.
I don't think he's made a movie that doesn't have very omnipresent French flag and French
Interesting.
colouring throughout. Yeah.
Well, we can talk about that. But it's we'll talk about it later.
I mean, what did I think
Yeah.
of this film? God, it's a tough question. It's out there. It's really out there.
So you're not wholly positive about it.
No, not at all. I'm just trying to figure it out because I haven't really thought about it. To be quite honest, it was an experience, and I
It is an
experienced
experience,
it.
Yeah.
And then I walked away from it a bit, but I really respect what they did. I watched the special features and things on the Blu-ray, and it's interesting how they did it, how quickly it was. In many respects, it's like the type of performance art that I would love to make personally.
I was thinking about that, though. You might have some experience from like drama school, maybe something there that might have connected with you differently than for us.
Like, I love the fact that they're not actors. There's only real one or two
two, I think,
actors within this, and the rest are actually,
and they have these big
true
long
dancers.
kind of set pieces, long take set pieces,
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
dance scene at the start.
Well, it's kind of like it goes at first. It's like dance, talking, like it follows
and
like a
it's
rhythmic.
not so different. I mean, it could work as a play, I would imagine.
Yeah,
It's
well,
all
definitely, it's one set, isn't
basically
it?
one situation. Yeah.
Well, I think I really enjoyed this. Sorry to cut you off, but I think I really.
I thought you were done, so carry on.
No, no, but I think I really enjoyed this film, and the more I think about it, the more I want to watch it again and again, and take out of it more and more each time.
It's interesting on a second watch.
It suddenly like switches, doesn't it? Like there's like this light bulb moment or something. I
guess we'll talk about the structure of it a bit. But like there's like a midpoint.
It's literally halfway through.
It plays then the opening credits in the middle of the film, and then
it does.
It goes to black, and then it opens with the shot of the sangria, and then it's a nightmare for the whole second half.
Yeah.
Impressive film.
Yeah, I also think it's extremely good. I'm not sure if I could absolutely state it's my favorite Gaspar Noé movie, but it's towards the top for me. I mean, Irreversible is great. I Stand Alone is great. Another Void is great. But I think it's a powerful experience. I think it's the way that it builds up these relationships and then completely destroys the social fabric and reduces them to basically their base instincts, their base humanity. And mob rule takes over and stuff. It appeals to my kind. It's very tied up in nihilism, like all of his movies are. The way that it doesn't take a lot for people to just fall through the bottom of society and become the worst that society would think of them. I think it's an incredible portrayal of just a nightmare. There's a lot of dialogueless scenes with kind of haunting and beautiful imagery, and the sound design is insane. Like the screams from afar and the things left unshown, but you presume that they are happening. And it's scary. I mean, there's a reason it was in my top 5 scariest movies of all time, because it's not necessarily like in your face horror. There's no monsters, but all of the people there have the capacity to do monstrous things because they've been taken away from their inhibitions to a certain point that they're not really
I do actually
behaving sensibly anymore.
I think that like the perpetrator is actually quite terrifying. Like on a second watch, when you know who it is, like everything that they do is recontextualized, and they're actually quite a scary person.
It's basically a psychopathic.
Yeah, really, like an actual psychopath.
Horrifying thing to do. To basically dose people unaware, like
and in large amounts.
Yeah, exactly.
The way they're drinking that stuff.
Even if you know you were taking that drug, that's a huge amount to take. And, if things go bad, it's hard to stop them from being bad. But to take those kind of things without knowing about it is the most scary thing imaginable, because you're just going to think you're insane. You're just going to think you're losing your mind, and everybody around you is losing their mind. And that's scarier than a monster to me, I think. Yeah.
What influence did you see within this for directing and the idea?
Well, it's quite interesting because at the start when the interviews are being conducted on the TV screen and you're surrounded by VHSs, there's quite a lot of his influences there.
Those are his like books and DVDs and videos and things.
You just like get them on the camera, but I mean like Possession, like there's like
there's a big
massive reference to it in like one of the shots at the end, isn't there?
Yeah. And it name drops Christiane F as well, which is another like quite horrifying drug drama / thriller shenanigan. But yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of influence from his own movies. He's got a distinctive style, and it powers its way through. It's very French. It's taken a lot from your kind of like 50s ultra realist dramas of the time, where it's like presented in such a realistic manner, and we're not seeing anything of what's happening. We're only seeing the end result, and that's horrifying in itself. For to not really be in these people's brains or really understanding the thought process, we have to guess at that, and that makes it kind of more horrifying than it could possibly be.
I've heard it compared to a Jello.
Oh, Jello.
A Jello.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, because that's what the director himself has said, that it's potentially like that because you see the reveal at the end of the and it's like this.
It has Jello elements. I would definitely not call it a Jello movie. But the
well, they should all be wearing gloves if it's going to be a true Jello, yeah,
and using knives. But
Yeah.
like the visual presentation with its bright colors.
He also
backlit.
says it's Titanic too. He compared it
Titanic
to Titanic
2?
on set, not Titanic 2.
Cinematic masterpiece. Titanic 2.
T-O-O.
Yeah,
Not T-W-O.
yeah.
It's like saying boy and boy,
yeah.
like B-U-O. Yeah.
Well, buoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reveal at the end
Or
is
is
a
it
bit
B-O-U?
Jello-esque, but I don't think it's really. I mean, not for me. I don't think it's particularly asking the question after a certain point who did it. It no longer really matters.
For me, although
Although you could argue that it does matter because of the ending. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that reveal as the final shot.
I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I'm saying that it's not prioritized in the narrative after a certain point. And after a certain point, these things are going to happen, and this is what happens, regardless of who did it.
I think like the aesthetic is pretty Jello, right? The color, the use of
the
color
palette and the backlit environment,
especially the final sequence when it basically just becomes hell. Like the way that they use like diegetic color there. Lots of primary colors, right? Like
and these long kind of tracking shots following people from behind is a bit Jello as well.
Yeah.
When they're entering into these bright atmospheres and you're experiencing their kind of revelation of what's happening. I'm not sure I get the Titanic thing though, just because it's a disaster movie.
No, because they say it's like a dance togetherness. They're all having a good time, and it comes a disaster.
It breaks apart at a certain point.
And the best and the worst of people come out in these situations. So you've got like in Titanic, the guy who wants to get in the lifeboat with the women and children. The worst comes out. He might be a normal guy. Then the best of someone comes out when they, like DiCaprio's character, he sacrifices himself at the end so she can survive. The best of you comes out as well. You might become more protective. So like Daddy, he becomes protective at the end.
Yeah.
Unless he has sex with our little boy, which maybe he does.
You say little boy.
Oh, okay.
It's not a little boy.
Young man.
Yeah. Well, it's a presentation of societal collapse, isn't it, really? It's like a bottle version of that, where like the external input isn't present. It's basically they're subjected to what that person has done to them, and they can't escape it. There is no escaping it. They try and escape it with the Coke woman, and that doesn't go very well.
Yeah. That goes so well.
Yeah.
Fucking Bunsen burner on. Like, what's that?
Yeah. I'm not sure why that was on, really. I mean,
heroin? Maybe there was some heroin there?
I guess. But like the only drug use we saw her do was snorting,
Coke,
and they presumed it was Coke. But
maybe she just wanted to put it on, because they're in a school, aren't they? It's in a school. That's where they filmed it.
It's like an old Catholic school, isn't it? Yeah.
So maybe it was there and she just put it on because she's fucked out of her
just
brain.
wanted the visuals.
Yeah.
Well, even in near the beginning, actually thinking about like possession and movies like that have that element to them, there's that Christian element, and there is the kind of
there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion about God at the beginning. There's a lot of crosses around as well.
But that's interesting. That came from because there's no actual script as such in this. You know, most of the movie is improvised by the dancers themselves.
Allegedly, it was only 5 pages when they started shooting. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, this must have been maybe a bullet point to go in that direction, or they just spoke and that's what he kept in. Like, it's quite interesting.
I think a lot of the discussions are basically they they highlight the differences between all of the people there, and it runs the gamut of everything as far as religion and views on women and views on
there's definitely
and
like
sex and
definitely like
consent and all sorts.
Yeah,
there's definitely a commentary, I think.
It's giving you a picture of society and trying to present to you like these are all of the kind of people that are present in French society or world human society.
I don't know if this is maybe too much or not, but like it's because after like the opening dance, when they're quite harmonious, like it's one, they're all working together to produce one thing. But then after that ends, the party starts and we get the little vignettes of them talking, and that's when you see when we get all these different discussions, and you see that they're not so unified. Like there's a lot of like conflict, a lot of a massive diversity. Like you initially see them as like one coherent unit, but like they don't really know each other that well, right? They're kind of talking about each other, bitching about each other, gossiping about each other, trying to fuck each other, trying to fuck with each other, not like don't respect each other. Like
they're cohesive as a dance troupe and as French people.
Yeah. But they're
meant to be going to America.
But there's something there. Yeah.
Well, they can cooperate, but they kind of choose not to as soon as they're independent. They're all of a sudden basically all against each other in various different ways.
Yeah.
And trying to use each other or like play each other against each other and stuff. And it's all social commentary, and it's all building towards when you like all of the inhibitions are gone and those things become actuality. Yeah.
What I find fascinating about this opening half, before we get to the more horror adjacent stuff, is the to get that's truly naturalistic acting. Like the acting in it, I was really like, wow, these guys are just like shooting the breeze. They're talking like normal people. There's almost no performance within it. Weird in a way. I was like, people strive for naturalistic style acting, but to do that, they get to know a character so very well. It's like I have to look inside the character. What does this character want? Peel the onion. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
all of that stuff. These guys are dancers. You wouldn't necessarily expect a good dancer to be a good actor.
Yeah,
right? But for the naturalism of this, it works, and I think that you have to give huge credit to the director. I think.
Yeah, and the way he collaborated with them to develop the characters.
Yeah.
That I think it was the interviews actually they filmed at the end. Everything else was filmed sequentially. But I think for like the vignettes when they're talking, he basically got them into groups and just put the camera on them for like 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And that, gave them the motivation for the character because they're not playing themselves, but otherwise just do what you want,
That's
right?
what he's done in his other movies, basically. He lets them like improvise as much as they can and kind of naturally on the spot like come up with these things, and then it's such a natural delivery that he can cut it together and become.
I think the most amazing thing, is that some of the characters are quite scummy. Like they're not very good people. Some of them, right?
But they're not bad people either. They're just
they're kind of
on the nose.
Yeah, but I think that they're kind of. Some of them are like not socially acceptable. Some of the stuff they're talking about is not socially acceptable. So there is acting and performance in it. They're not just playing themselves, where they say...
What's not necessarily socially acceptable.
Unless they are like that, you don't really know to what degree...
Well, no, like for example, like the two guys like are basically talking about sexual assault and like shoving their dick down women's throats.
Is that not normal speak in a locker room, though? Is that not what some guys do? That's socially acceptable to them?
It depends what you term as socially acceptable, right? Socially acceptable is in the mainstream, no. But some people do speak like that, and that's why it's in the movie, because it's a reflection of a part of society that does speak that way.
Yeah, but presumably, although I guess not necessarily, like they're not the opinions of the people saying it, right? So they are actually performing as characters.
Yeah.
But it does feel
there's character in there, but there is natural. Like, so Kiddy Smile, who plays Daddy in there, he was saying that he was inspired by his own personality within this film. So he wanted to turn the dial up on certain parts of him and who he was in this movie. So he wanted to turn up his paternal, like his instinctiveness to be a caring person, which in the end he comes to that realization. When he looks
does.
after
but he's
his boy.
I mean, there's a bit of ambiguity about what happens at the end with him, but he's mostly a morally sound character, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's kind of easier to accentuate stuff about yourself from a morally sound character. But some of them aren't, and some of them, they're not actors, but they do have to play, I think, characters. Right, the brother and sister,
but
right?
we can never know, basically, when it comes to improvisation, whether they're acting using parts of themselves to aid the role, or whether they're or parts of people they know to aid the role, or they're just purely going off of the basis of what the director told them.
But for a good performance, there has to be truth within what they're saying. They have to believe it. They have to be that character, and for sometimes that means those parts of you that aren't necessarily the ones you want to put out there. You can put that out there in a different way through a character and make that your vessel. So sounds all pretentious, but like that's kind of how sometimes.
But when people are given anonymity, they do speak like that.
Yeah,
quite a lot of the time on the internet and so on, when there's no face behind what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's to a certain extent in all of us in a certain way. Like everybody has the capacity to be objectifying of other people. Everybody has the capacity to have no quarrels about saying things about them that are incredibly offensive to the person if they were to hear it.
So, like Lou, the pregnant character, was also renamed Suela Jeku, or something like that.
Excellently pronounced.
She's one of the two actors.
Yeah, she is.
And the other one is Sophia Boutella, who's like super famous, and I recognise her from Kingsman and stuff.
And she came into this very late. She was only asked 2 days before to be involved.
Oh, really?
Before she started filming. All the other actors, performers who were already there, they started relaxing. They'd been brought together earlier so they could gel as a unit. She came in very late. So she wasn't pregnant. She wasn't going through this sort of idea of abortion.
It aids the isolation narrative, though, of her character.
Exactly. That's what she said. Because she came in late. Everyone else had already gelled. And she went in thinking, so what would Lou do? What would Lou be doing at this moment? How do I get to know her? But actually what she needed to do and what the purposefulness of her coming in so late was to just play that natural being an outsider. She's naturally an outsider within that and is a lost person. And in that specific scenario, she was lost. So she can put that into and narrow it down so that's what she's seeing in that scene. So it's actually very natural to what she's feeling in that moment, even if it isn't her actual thoughts.
Are you saying that because she has more acting experience, you're saying that she first tackled it by like trying to think what would
she originally went in going.
So are you actually saying that like in a way like it was she had to unwire her own programming and try
she had to be more like just the dancers going in with it. But she also said that he's a huge director, like he's an incredible director, and so the two of them who are actors were in there taking it much more seriously, whereas the dancers outside of that world were kind of laughing and joking and having a better time and just enjoying the experience of being involved in a film, because they're genuine dancers who audition for a dance project, not for an acting project. So whatever they do doesn't matter in the same way as what an actor does when they suddenly are transported to this world. So they had a lot more weight on their shoulders. And I definitely think...
Well, yeah, he's an experimental director. So, I mean, working with Gaspar Noé is leagues away from working with Scorsese or someone who works in a very traditional sense. So, to a certain extent, you're kind of being manipulated by him to be in a right state of mind to improvise on set what you're feeling and how the character would be feeling, because he's put you in this situation that it's either at ease when he wants the character to be at ease, or not at ease if he doesn't want them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, they would film until 3-4 in the morning. They'd start at 3 p.m, go till 3-4 a.m. And it adds to that desperation, exhaustion. And their best performances would come out of those times where they're the most exhausted they've been. You know, and you really go into overdrive and a bit mental and crazy. And that's where these sort of weird extreme things happen and ideas, because it's all improvised. All these sort of things happen in those where your brain goes to more depths to stay awake and stay alive. So I've been involved in theatre festivals where they're like all-nighters, and the weirdest shit happens at 4 or 5 in the morning. Like the weirder thoughts and feelings and what you then put into your performance and what is improvised, what is done, all comes out in that moment of time. And you lose those inhibitions in a way, and you become more, I don't know, just more free, but also like more on edge. There's a lot more like emotion that comes out. There's a lot more exhaustion and a lot more kind of tired and deprivation, sleep deprivation. But it all adds in, and it shows in this film
Yeah, and if he's trying to basically put together a situation where chaos reigns and ideas are being like thrown up in the air from these dancers out of nowhere, he needs to put them into that situation. It's like it reminds me of when Dustin Hoffman was working on I forget the name of the movie. But it was with
Marathon Man.
Marathon Man, correct, with Laurence Olivier, and he'd stayed up for 3 days or 3 nights or something because he was method acting in order to look exhausted and behave exhausted. And Laurence Olivier asked him, "Have you ever tried acting?"
Yeah, the famous quote. Yeah.
But like as Gaspar Noé, the director, if he's working with a load of people that aren't necessarily traditional actors, a good way to basically get them into the state of mind that he wants them in is in order to basically Dustin Hoffman them, right? Like get them exhausted from the filming process if he wants them to be drained and exhausted on the screen, which is great.
It comes across so well as well. And a lot of the ideas, he was so open to the ideas of them and them going. So like when Daddy starts rolling on the floor, you know, when he's really high and he's like, he's like, I think my character would crumble in this scenario because he was originally meant to stay standing up. He went, oh yeah, that's great, do it. You know, he worked with them all the way and let them guide where the story was going to go.
I know,
like movement piece, right?
It's brilliant for the sense of chaos, though, because obviously in that environment you're going to get ideas coming from everybody there, and they all tie together in a certain way to aid the kind of narrative of things breaking down and everyone being an individual and everyone behaving in the exact way that they want to behave, regardless of what everybody else is doing. And so they've all got these disparate kind of things to add to the visual spectacle, and that aids the movie because the movie is exactly supposed to be presenting the fact that everybody's behaving with not a care at all for everybody else that's there.
I think it kind of related to what you were saying. Like one thing I really appreciated about this film is there's I think 24 cast members, right? I think 24.
I don't know that off the top of my head. Yeah.
And, you know, I would say probably off the top of my head, I could probably name 6 or 7 of them. So there's quite a lot of like people that get a bit less screen time.
It's an ensemble.
They spotlight David, Salva, Dom,
Psyche, Daddy, Lou, the brother and sister to Taylor and something.
Gazelle and
Taylor, but because there are some people that basically don't do anything except dance. Yeah, like they're one, you know, and I really like admire that they had like restraint in some of them. That not everybody is having exactly the same.
Yeah,
like,
but that's part of the social kind of critique, though, isn't it? I mean, I guess some people, when they're reverted to their base desires, they don't necessarily hurt other people, or they don't freak out, or they don't do anything. Like they just want to have a good time.
And it's also part of the dancer's life is that they're not always going to be the center of attention. And in most cases, they're not really, unless it's very specifically a dance piece about them and they're going through in their movement. A lot of the time, there's an actor or there's a singer, and they're a troupe of dancers. And they're supporting the lead. There's always a lead, and there's a huge ensemble behind it. You see it in musicals, you see it in operas, you see it in ballets. It happens all the time in this stuff. So I think it's just natural for the dancers to be there propping up the main bulk, the 6 or so of the main characters.
I think it's also a good way of hiding who actually put the drugs in the punch, right? Because I don't think at any point in the story are we, as the audience, ever really going to believe it was the pregnant girl or the guy that was thrown outside. We kind of...
Omar,
we kind of know it was one of the people that have drank the sangria. And if they knowingly took the drug and were a user of the drug, they're not going to be one of the people that's screaming in the corridors or doing these kind of things. They're going to be one of the people dancing there normally. So it's a good way of hiding the fact that it was Psyche that did it.
Man, it's so interesting watching it again when you know it's her. It's so interesting.
Well, have you looked up the supposed timestamp, which is 20 minutes 30 seconds when she does it?
Oh, you can see her doing it in the...
Well, some people believe that. I'm not so convinced.
Oh, right.
But it's when Gazelle and the guy that gets kicked outside,
Omar,
are dancing right in front of the punch bowl, and she goes over there with a full drink and picks up something and then walks away from the table with no change in her drink. So that's the theorized moment of it being done. Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you have any favorite characters or like characters that like stuck out in your mind that you want to spotlight?
Yes, David. I like David.
Yeah, he's such a loser. Poor old David.
He's such a piece of scum, or at least the way that they think of it. Well, what he says is scummy enough, but what the hell they talk about him paints him even as an even worse character.
But he's such a loser. Jesus Christ.
But he's quite
the way he's wandering around at the end trying to get in, and everybody else's sexual business.
Please.
Well, is he trying to get in on
and they just beat the shit out of him and leave him alone.
Hold on. But is he trying to get in on their sexual business, or is he just scared at that point? I think he's crumbled and he's quite scared, but he's fucked them over all so much, and they all hate him, and they think he's scum. That he's.
I think he really wants to fuck someone. Like I think
the way he was
approaching
these situations, and he was doing a lot of grabbing of people and stuff.
Yeah.
I think,
and all of his chickens came home to roost, basically at the end.
Yeah,
and it was also interesting.
I think he's a little bit. There's a little bit more depth to him than you're giving him credit for.
Well, I mean, he's an inherently sad character.
Yeah, because
and so of course he's scared by the end that he's left by himself.
Treating other people as disposable, and so they treat him back as disposable afterwards.
Yeah. That's implied.
You're saying the only thing in his mind is literally sex at the end when he's a scared little boy.
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
That is what he's doing, but that doesn't mean that it's purely from the basis of I want sex. He's
lonely. He realizes that he has no one and he wants someone.
His translation of like.
So you're saying, what are you saying at the end then? What is he doing at the end?
He wants to feel safe, but his idea of safety is a sexual relationship with one of the women there.
Yeah,
interesting.
And it was interesting, that the.
Although I disagree with the idea of that. Though for him at the end, I don't disagree with it earlier in the film, but I think by that time he's gone beyond that.
I don't think it changes any of these people. The drug use.
It just reveals
it just strips them naked of all of their inhibitions and reduces them to base
I disagree.
desire.
No, but I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
Like,
because I think he is a scared, lonely, like he's basically an incel. Like, and he has no opinion of himself, really, deep down. He wants that validation, right?
Yeah.
And then he realizes by the end that he can't have anybody, and then he's left alone, and then that scares him.
But I disagree that the idea of that this is just them turned up to 11 now because they're on the acid. I don't necessarily believe. I think it, brings certain things out of you, but that doesn't necessarily define you. I think the idea of defining someone high on an acid trip it
doesn't necessarily define them. It doesn't have to define them.
No, but you're saying it
totally.
just heightens that one specific thing. But I think it's more nuanced.
It brings out something that was always inside you. It doesn't necessarily define you as a person, but it does mean that it was a part of your psyche. It doesn't
invent a personality trait. Like it's there. Yeah, I think. Although I did think it was interesting, that he got a bit of a taste of his own medicine with that young man that was like, I'm gonna lose my virginity to him. And then he, like, in the second half of the film, is hounding David. Just like how David was hounding all the women at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of poetic in a way. I liked Salva. I thought that, like, her story is quite sad, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because, like, she spends the first half being hounded by David, and then the second half being hounded by that blonde Russian girl. I forgot her name.
I don't think she's necessarily Well, she is led along by it.
I don't think
Which
she's
one is Salva? Be more specific.
Sofia Boutella, like she's the choreographer, the main woman of it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and like,
but I think she has somewhat a bit of safety and peace of mind, and kind of it takes her away from the horrors of what's going outside.
Yeah, I think so, because I think she has basically like a mental breakdown, and then like she's like, okay,
that scene is amazing when she's
that is an
amazing
performance,
riding around, and then she sees the forest and
I also like it for her when she's like, oh look up, like when the kid's been locked in the cupboard, and then the mother's looking for the keys, like I'll watch him, and then like 1 second later she's distracted and leaves. It's so funny. But yeah, I think she has a complete mental breakdown, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna get out this space and go in this room with this woman, but she like doesn't want to be there. I don't think that was my reading of it.
Well, it was my reading was that her mind was breaking down. Her emotions were like flatlining, and she needed to find some kind of safe space. Maybe she didn't necessarily want the sexual element of that relationship, but she was like anything, clearly felt safer in there than she did outside.
And it is safer in there.
Yeah,
like there's no doubt that room is safer, and like closing. She wanted that earlier in the film anyway. When she goes back to Lou, they what they should have done really is close the door and lock the damn thing.
Yeah.
And then they would have been out of it and just been able to be in their little safe space.
You get that psychopath Dom coming in and kicking the shit
Yeah.
out of Lou. Jesus.
But I found that quite interesting, though, because, I mean, that is the way some people might react completely, right? When they feel like they're threatened, then they're wronged, and they're not going to take any other information as part of that. They lash out violently, and it's one of the most shocking scenes in the entire movie when she
causes a miscarriage
and then kicks her, and she's kind of like whimpering and
it's really like,
and like asking for help
difficult
on the
to watch
floor.
that bit,
It's powerful, but it's the same kind of thing that does happen all the time, right? Like people are incapable of feeling any kind of remorse or guilt or empathy for the person that they've just hurt because they thought they were already hurt, and they think it's tit for tat or
her
eye
like
for an eye.
You know, at the end of the film when we like cut and see everybody's fates, Dom is like on it. She's crying. I think that she like realizes by the end what she's done.
Yeah,
because she doesn't do much else after that, right? Like Lou as well.
Well, she's also one of the ringleaders in the mob, kind of, pointing at both the guy that gets kicked out and the pregnant woman, that they were the cause of it.
But they do Omar first. I think they throw him out first, and then they do Lou, and then she like beats the shit out of Lou and basically causes a miscarriage and causes her to have a complete psychotic break and cut herself.
Yeah.
And then I think after that, Dom pretty much disappears, right? And we see her at the end, and she's by herself, like distraught. Like I think she realizes.
Correct, but that's only after the emotions have faded and she realizes that the logic of blaming those people is faulty. Yeah.
What's your distinction of the idea that it heightens the thing that's already there, like their personality trait or something there? Because the person who kicks a pregnant woman in the stomach, was that person already violent? Do they become hyper violent, or is that something that only the drugs do?
I'm talking on an emotional level. So it takes a huge amount of anger and disdain for a person to hurt them in that way. I don't think she believed she was pregnant in the first place. Only later on did she realize that.
But she would if she wasn't high, right?
Correct, but.
So it's not really part of that person's personality or their makeup. It's drug induced.
That's only affecting the information you're processing. That's not affecting who you are as a person and how you react.
So you're saying she's a hyper violent, volatile person who will beat up a pregnant woman in?
No, I'm saying she has very much the capacity to that, and maybe she has self-control usually to stop herself from doing that. But without any kind of inhibitions on a person because of the drugs she's taken, then she will act on those.
But the drug rewires the mind. It doesn't just heighten things, it rewires it. LSD specifically does rewiring, right?
Yeah, it puts your emotions and your visuals in a flux state where you're basically like zooming around from emotion to emotion, and what you're seeing is changing all the time. But all those emotions are in you. It doesn't introduce anything new. If anything, it unearths things that you didn't consciously know were there in the first place. I think it's totally. I mean, we have no reading of how much drugs they were subjected to. Presumably a huge amount, like more than most people, even if they're taking the drug recreationally, would probably take. And on that kind of dose, you're stripped of everything. You're operating purely on an emotional basis. So maybe she's not a violent person as it stands, but because of the fear of what's happening, that precipitates an emotional response.
Well, I mean, they're all basically suffering from psychosis, like actual,
correct,
like medical craziness, basically, and
so it's not how she would react all the time, but it's how she would react in a crisis when she was scared.
And like, I mean, like she had, she was put in a situation without her consent, and she believed that this person did it to her, and
it's the worst thing to do to someone.
I
mean, if someone dosed me with that level of drugs, without my knowing, I would be probably angry enough to that person to be violent to that person, because that's a horrible thing to do. Like you could possibly never recover from an experience like that. So I think it's totally understandable for even an average person to feel violent in that circumstance, because you can be dealing with like PTSD or residual side effects of that experience for years from that. So
what do you think of the brother and sister Taylor and
it was fucked up before the drugs even
yeah,
started.
it's very toxic.
Yeah.
It's so interesting on a second watch.
Literally, that opening sequence, they're wanting to fuck each other even then.
Well, I don't think
there's like such an atmosphere between them, and like
I don't think they
Like we're closer than most.
I don't know if they want to fuck each other. Like he wants to fuck her.
It's definitely powered by the brother. But
Yeah.
The sister isn't necessarily doing anything to shut it down. If anything, she's mildly.
Do you want to know some interesting
encouraging.
things that I noticed on the second watch? So in the second dance sequence, the top down one when the drugs are starting to take effect, it's really interesting watching that. And Omar, who's her boyfriend, like from like 9 months, right? They've been dating for a while. He starts dancing, doing some moves, and then the brother comes in, shoves him out the way, and does exactly the same moves, but like more.
Yeah.
And then she I can't remember if it's straight after or later. She like tries to do a dance as well, and then gets pushed out of the way immediately, like just to show that she has just the least autonomy out of all the characters.
Yeah.
In the troupe. It's really interesting watching a second time.
Yeah. Because throughout the entire run, she's kind of like being manipulated.
She's
by her
an
brother.
object. I mean, Omar seems like a super stand-up guy, but he's out of the story pretty quick.
Yeah.
And like David's trying to fuck her, like the brother's obviously trying to manipulate her, and she doesn't.
Well, the brother keeps parroting like, "Why this guy?"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You know when he says, "Why this guy?" It's like, "Why this guy rather than me?" Is kind of what he's thinking. Yeah.
But like the most interesting characters to watch on a second watch is Psyche. Jesus Christ, it's interesting. Yeah. Like how she's so aloof. Like she's basically like an actual sociopath. She's so bored by the whole thing. That's why she does it, because she's bored. And she says that when she's talking to, because like that, before the little blonde woman moves on to Salva, she's trying to get with Psyche, right? And like they're talking, and she has no interest. She's not even looking at her.
Yeah,
and she's just so bored. And
well, she says like, "Can you even like acknowledge that I'm here?"
Yeah. And like, what's interesting as well, you may not have realized this, but Psyche comes onto the dance floor and pisses on the floor.
Yeah, I did notice. Well, I remember it, and then when it's revealed at the end, you go, "Oh."
Yeah, because I didn't think about it till the second watch. When you see her doing that, you're like, "Oh, that's an interesting thing," because like she's obviously. Like she can handle her drugs right. At the end, she does a shitload.
It's a willful choice to change the atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's like a predator move. It's a power move.
Because
it turns. That's what turns. That's what turns.
Because hallucinogens.
Because they're also having kind of a good time. It's a bit extra, but like they're kind of having a good. But then she makes them.
Hallucinogens are basically like you're hyper aware of what's going on, and any little thing that affects you emotionally.
Yeah, and it's spiral.
Change it. Change your entire like emotional state. So if she introduces something like that, which is out of character and seems like something's wrong,
like this is
people
bad.
Start
this is a bad. This is not a normal thing.
People start questioning: is there something wrong with her?
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with me?
Yeah. And it spiral from there.
That's like the kickoff.
And then the video interviews at the beginning, she lies as well. She says that she's trying to get out of Berlin because she too many drugs.
Because of the roommate.
She has a roommate that does LSD in her eye, and obviously she's talking about herself and that.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing from the very beginning, she's lying. And also like especially the second half of the film when it goes crazier and crazier, she doesn't get a lot of spotlight, but she's very, very often in frame. Just kind of dancing. She's having a good time. She's having a great time, but she's always around watching it.
Yeah, it's part of her usual Tuesday night.
Yeah. But it's so creepy and so cool. Like it's really cool on a second watch to like focus on her. And I'd like find her quite scary. Like I think she's kind of a scary person. Like what she did is evil, really evil.
It's more horrifying than what slasher killers do.
Yeah, like people died, like kids died, like multiple people died, right? Like, and she just doesn't give a shit. She just carries on. Like
that's another switch, isn't it? When the lights all go on.
Yeah,
the kid's been fried.
And
like, oh my god,
Paco's fried.
or
whatever his name. Tito's fried.
Hold on, isn't Paco from you?
That's not you. Yeah. Not the kid from you.
Yeah.
Tito's fried. Yeah.
What is this? A crossover?
But yeah, it's like horrifying. It's like so very well presented in the sound design.
Because you hear
any of the people
you what
talking. You're just following. you're just following like the mother as she goes to investigate.
Yeah.
But you hear people complaining about like the music being stopped and like how they can get the music back on, and then there's still people piping up of like, Tito's been
he's
fried.
fried. That's funny. They're just
like
having
and
a laugh.
total.
It becomes a bit of a black comedy in that
Divorce.
scene.
Yeah,
So when it
reality.
happens, you're like, "Ooh, I shouldn't laugh."
And she's like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like,
Yeah.
and you can't have a laugh. But what's brilliant? So you mentioned the sound design before. Because Daddy is the DJ and he's taking the drugs as well.
Yeah.
Like his music choices as well.
It takes a darker.
Everything is
tone.
diegetic, right? Like there's no like all the music happens in the world.
Yeah, correct.
So it's like kind of regular dance music at the beginning, and then it's kind of evil dance music at the end. It's really interesting. And also in like the middle portion of the film, when the kid's trapped, you can hear him screaming. In all the different scenes.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he stops screaming, right? And it's such a brilliant way of like justifying changing the lighting for the final act, like that the kind of help without breaking the world. Like everything is in the
It
universe.
seems like such a natural progression, both in what you're hearing and what you're seeing, towards this kind of nightmare escape that you get.
Yeah.
And that scene when Salva's outside the door and the kid is presumably like having his own drug hell and he's screaming from inside is like really horrifying, I find.
Yeah, and then she just loses interest and walks away.
Well, she screams before she does.
Yeah.
You have, when you're in that kind of state of mind when you feel threatened and you feel scared and you don't know what's happening, you want to get yourself as far away from influences that you think are to blame for that, or you think they're going to make you worse. She's at the door hearing this child screaming, having a really, really, really bad time.
Yeah.
It's totally believable she's going to be want to be as far away from that as possible. As we, the audience, I feel like also do, because we know what's going in there, and that's horrible. And it's such a powerful choice to not show us once that kid's locked in there. We never until the very, very end when we never revisit what's going on in that room.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant choice.
We all knew where it was going to go, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not Dave foreshadowing. That's real foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you get it from afar away because she's leading the child by the arm, and before we even get to the door, we can see the very recognizable high voltage yellow.
Exactly.
So
she's like, just don't touch that.
And
just pathetically closes it.
Yeah.
I like that there's kind of like clues because she doesn't have custody of him, right? And that she doesn't see him very much. And
and this is the first 3 days she spent with him for years or something.
And you kind of can see the some of the characters mention that this isn't really the right place for a child of that age.
It's interesting, because Lou says that. Like she says it's not the right place for a kid, and of course she's pregnant, so she's thinking about that.
Yeah.
Another thing, like in the like final sequence that I liked, there were two things that felt like horror references. The three. So the possession thing we talked about down the corridor. There's like a couple shots with like one of the guys like doing this kind of thing, like contorting his body in the background.
Yeah, there is contortion.
Yeah,
and it looks like something like from Silent Hill. Like it looks like a monster in that final. When the lights have gone out and everything, you see him kind of silhouetted in the back.
Yeah,
it doesn't look human anymore.
Unnatural movements. Yeah.
And the final one I noticed,
which is a lot of like horror of the time that this was released anyway, like your Marmars and your lights out.
It's true,
that kind of thing, all focused on like long limbs moving in a kind of
craggly,
horrible way.
Craggly,
yeah.
And the final one I noticed is when the blonde woman is leading Salva to the bedroom. She's like, she's doing this like a zombie. I was thinking like
she's
a
kind of like flicking her head, right?
Yeah.
But they're all understandable. It's not like, for example, because we're using a believable drug here, a drug that really exists in this world. If it was to go in the wreck direction, that wouldn't have been particularly, or even halfway to that, right? Where people become monsters or they become completely devoid of anything other than like violence. I love the restraint because there's a knife there that she uses to cut herself, but at no point does anybody feel the need to like actually murder anybody else or anything like that. There's a lot of restraint. There's a lot of horrible things committed, but they're all so based in reality and like interpersonal conflicts. There's nobody doing something just because of the drug. They're all coming from things that we've been like subtly told in the first half of the movie. That's that's how they view this other person, or that's what they want, or
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
they don't like. I think it shows like a brilliant amount of restraint, that it doesn't devolve into full horror. It
Yeah,
it
to
just
be honest,
presents-
like I think the temptation would have been strong.
yeah,
I think that, yeah, like you say, make it devolve completely into like
full hell
one person
world
left
of-
standing.
yeah,
And it does kind of devolve
like
into
battle royale kind
It
of.
is-
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would disagree that it doesn't go into full horror.
It,
It's definitely full horror.
It does become full, and it does become a like a hell world. Like
But
you
it's
say.
a lot more of a psychological horror than a.
It's not like a murderer running around with a
proper
knife.
horror.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the horror takes so many different forms.
precisely. That's precisely why
But
it's
this
good.
is a much more believable one
yeah.
than
Yeah.
it could have been.
But then that's why I would say it's not horror adjacent. It is just a straight up
Oh no,
horror film,
absolutely.
right?
I think it's a horror film. Yeah, but it would have been so easy to and then eventually one character gets the knife and is just killing everybody else. Like it just devolves. And
Yeah,
it's
and
almost almost like low hanging.
Yeah,
like
a lazier
low-hanging fruit.
director
Yeah,
or someone who was just going for shock value. I know this is a shocking movie, obviously, but someone who was going
Yeah.
for easy shock value would have had a lot more explicit or even shown violence, because we know that violence happens and we know that rapes are happening and these horrible things are happening, but they're shown in such a like reserved way that makes them more powerful. The screams of the kid never seeing what actually happens.
Yeah, because
to him.
what's happening off
Or-
camera is more horrific than what's
Yeah.
happening on.
Yeah,
And
or
that's
like
a trope from
when we
start of cinema.
Yeah.
and when they walk past the woman that's like scrubbing her skin to the point
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
bleeding,
Yeah.
and it's just like a drive-by scene. We don't linger on her.
Even
It's
the
like-
setting her hair on fire with a Bunsen burner, we only see that
Just literally in
very,
passing as
in
we go.
passing, yeah.
yeah,
And then we see her again in the shower later, or like trying to with the water in the, doing a pathetic attempt at.
Yeah.
The level of restraint is
Yeah.
like incredible. And
Yeah,
I think it's
I mean, in my opinion, the most
Brilliant.
horrific thing that happens apart from the kid dying, I guess, is the incest. The
Mm.
brother, like, because she's having a seizure on the floor, right? And he
Yeah.
comes in and then takes her away, and then it cuts to the next morning, and it's like, don't tell dad, don't tell dad. And so
Yeah.
you don't see it happen.
well, it's quite a horrible.
No,
thing
but they
because-
do that
because-
before in the bathroom, though, aren't they? They're having sex in the bathroom.
Well, no, they're
Isn't that?
about to have sex. I don't think they are. They're fully clothed and no, they're being
Yeah,
very.
but she's
sexual,
wearing a
but they're-
skirt and that. And
I don't think they have sex until later on off
No,
screen.
yeah,
They're-
it cuts, I think,
yeah.
and they've had sex, yeah. But
But I
because
think-
she has a
yeah.
seizure, like she has like a seizure on
Yeah.
the floor, doesn't she? Like
Yeah.
in the final sequence where.
But I
it's
think
like
the words are very powerful that he uses, right? He says nothing happened, and then he about 5 seconds later.
Does
says,
that
"Don't
definitely
tell Dad."
happen then?
That's
what that
or
they had
you-
sex.
yeah,
It's heavily
It's
intimated.
certainly implied, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting that your mind has gone to that.
I feel like everybody's mind goes to that. Did you think that
I
they
don't
didn't?
know. I didn't think anything at that point. Really, I was just sort of watching the end. I wasn't analysing it in that respect. But it's interesting that you did think that, and that's an interesting. Actually, what we were just saying about.
I think that definitely did happen, but it showed restraint to not show it.
Exactly,
happen.
but what I'm saying is, it's interesting that you are going to that conclusion by what is not seen has become more horrific. Like literally giving an example of what we were.
Yeah, no,
just saying
absolutely,
there.
because that was what made me think of it. And
Yeah.
I don't really know. I probably it did happen.
and
it's more powerful not seeing it.
because I think the context, like of what happened just before with her literally having a seizure, and he's like ostensibly trying
Yeah.
to take her away and make her safe
Mm.
from this horrible situation, and then it cuts the next morning and he's fucked her.
Mm.
Like that's those two scenes, and then by not having the actual acts in it, it's so much more powerful. I think.
That's
Yeah,
in your mind,
very
though.
much so.
You're creating that in your mind still.
Yeah, but
that
that's what
idea.
makes it more
Yeah,
fucked up.
interesting. Only because if he was trying to have sex with her in the bathroom, there's also a reading. I guess I was reading it a bit more as if like waking up the next day and you come to and you're like, oh my god, I nearly did that. So there's that idea of I nearly did that, and there's the idea of I fully did that.
Yeah, I think
and
it's
both-
implied, but it's not necessarily fact. I mean, not a
Yeah.
lot of what happens because of the restraint. Not a lot of what happens here is factually given you as an event. But I think that's what makes it more powerful. If you've got a dark, horror-y mind like me that can paint a horrible picture of what happened, then it's more powerful than showing the kid get shot to death, or it's more powerful than the rape of the sister, or any of these number of things.
I
It's
would
more
like.
shocking.
It's interesting though because yes, it is a rape, but it's a rape by someone who is also heavily under an influence of a drug, which has really fucked them up. It's like the horror has happened to everyone in this. And I'm not
yes,
saying...
he's technically a victim, but like there's a lot of context around
No,
his behavior.
Well, the victim, the perpetrators are also victims. Everybody there
exactly.
that was dosed
That's
without their consent is a victim. So technically, all of these crimes
this is what I'm saying. Are they actual crimes that you could do anything about?
There's only
the court of law?
one prosecutable crime, which is what Psyche did, which is like evil. It's evil what she did.
I don't know. I don't know that. I feel like being intoxicated isn't an exemption from crimes. So if
intoxicated without consent, I don't know.
Yeah, but if the pregnant
thing.
girl went to the authorities and said, "This woman kicked the shit out of my stomach to give me an abortion," I don't think there's any way that the cops are going to write that off. But
who
the
was
justice system's going
also
to write that off because
out of their mind on LSD that was given to them in what they thought was alcohol and laced with it, and it wasn't them.
So you're saying it's the consensual or lack of consensual nature of the drug.
Yeah,
Psyche is a danger to society. She could do it again.
Yeah, but if we put this in,
Dom, like if she doesn't get, there's no indication right necessarily that she would actually act that way. Maybe it's buried inside her, sure, but there's no indication that she'd go around beating people up necessarily right outside. That she's actually a danger.
But people take too much drugs or the wrong drugs all the time.
Yeah, but willingly.
And if they committed a crime under the
that.
influence of that, it's not the drug dealer's fault. Even though
Psyche's not a drug dealer. It's not the same at all. Like
it's a completely different scenario.
I think. Well, it's just muddy water, isn't it? I mean,
no,
it is muddy water. Yes, you can't absolve the people that committed the crime just because of the drugs that.
I think you have to.
No.
If I give two people Rohypnol and they have sex with each other, I'm the bad person. They're not the bad person.
Yeah,
right?
but you didn't force them to. You may have given them
but
the drugs. You didn't force them to commit
consent
what they did.
Between the person having sex, the two people having sex, if they're a brother and sister or not. There's no consent from either of them in that scenario. That went out the window when their punch was laced with.
Yeah, but they were given a drug without their consent. I obviously agree, but everything they did after that point is by their own onus.
But it's not because they're out of their minds.
Intoxicated, but they still made those decisions in their.
But they didn't make those
state.
decisions. But no one has made a decision here. Everything that happens after they've taken a laced alcoholic drink, it's out of their hands at that point because not only did they not willingly take it, they didn't sign up for that. They aren't there mentally ready to do that. They didn't psych themselves up in advance. They immediately get put in a situation where it is then not only we also get her pissing on the floor, which turns events, and she is.
All I'm saying is they're not free from moral judgment just because of their intoxication level, consensual or not.
I think in a way they are, because it's not them. This is my argument throughout this podcast, right? Is that you're saying that it's them, but on a heightened scale. I'm not so sure.
Because in a hypothetical circumstance, which could happen, which would have been a lesser movie, where it was dosed and everybody kind of had a good time, except for one person who didn't have a good time, and they murdered someone else, would that still be under the guise of the person that?
No,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, consent is consent, and
so the murderer is the person that spiked the punch, not the person that actually did the stabbing.
If it's spiked, but.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
no, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't agree that it's entirely the person with the knife's fault because they were intoxicated against their will, but they have a part to play. It's not like
if you
there's no onus on them at all.
If you willingly go to the pub, you have 10 pints, then you get in your car and then you run over a 5-year-old kid on the street and they kill him.
It's your fucking fault.
That's your fault. If someone is passing you drinks and you think it's a soft drink, who actually it's alcohol, that then throws certain things out the window because you weren't expecting that.
But they would have felt intoxicated. It's not like they've completely felt so.
Yeah, but that again, that's second story. Doesn't necessarily work with
it's a bit messy because
they made the intoxicated decision to drive the car.
Yeah, it's different though, like because like that level of LSD is not the same as that level of drinking. It just isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Like because there's no.
But I have done acid.
Yeah.
I've done many drugs, but you always know that you're intoxicated. These people knew they were intoxicated.
Yeah, but surely they got
you've
into blind
never
panic.
like been to that level of like actual psychosis.
No, obviously
right?
not.
Yeah.
No.
And they're in blind panic because they didn't consent to that. That wasn't part of the deal. Like they've been put into a room. They can't go anywhere. They'll die outside. It's like minus 100 out there. It's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
what can they do? They're in a nightmare. They're literally stuck in a nightmare. And what happens? Like, and in a way, then that makes it not their fault. Only the person who did the original act, and then is actually
I'm not arguing
changing things as it goes. They literally pissed on the floor to start
Literally
this.
instigate. Like,
Instigating
like,
and molding to what they want to see as an experiment.
I'm arguing that it's majority the fault of the person that poisoned them or intoxicated them. But I don't think that you can completely and totally hand wave away any responsibility on the people that committed the act, because it came from them. They wanted to do these things. Their restrictions were eased, and they did them because of the restrictions being eased. But they still, in their fearful state of mind, they still chose to do.
But they weren't in control.
Yeah, what's the definition of choice?
When it comes to something as extreme as murder or rape, I don't think you can absolve someone so lightly of a crime.
But what I'm saying is, they may be committing a crime, but a crime has been committed upon them to make them act in such a way.
Yeah.
And that somewhat absolves.
And they also
somewhat absolves.
They also don't have.
I'm only saying somewhat absolves. That's what I'm saying.
But they don't have any
absolution.
opportunity to, even if they recognize that they're high, which they do. They don't have any opportunity to like remove themselves from the situation. Like, it's not like when you realize, even if your drink was spiked, or let's say you think you're drinking soft drinks and someone gives you alcohol, eventually you realize that you're drunk.
Mm.
But they only very briefly recognize and realize that they're high on something, and then they move past that point where then you see some of them in the background still drinking from it. And I'm like, why are you still drinking from it? Because they're not in their right mind. They're not there. It's not them.
But it's all based on the person's disposition, right? Some of them do stop drinking it. The Salva and
some of them because they're panicking,
lock themselves in a room. It's all based on how they react when they're in a state of fear or lack of personal control. I think we've talked about it enough, and I don't know how to argue it any further. But I think you can't absolve people that easily from what occurred.
I hope you're never on the jury.
I just think if you were going to put that,
there's more bad people in this movie than there is.
I don't think any of them are bad,
Psyche.
really, apart from obviously Psyche. I don't think they're any. I think they're a bohemian group of random people put together.
They have dark traits. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, they would never. But that incestuous feeling between the brother and the sister, there, maybe it did exist outside the scope of the story of the film that we saw. Like, I think there's enough evidence, in my opinion, that he was inappropriately feeling towards her for a long time. But that's what happens in your head is fine. You can think whatever you want.
Yeah, but
really, he doesn't act on it.
How are we to the audience, as the audience, knowing them in such this brief time, know that he would have never acted on those things anyway?
Well, we can't know for sure. But
And we can't judge a person on that idea either, can we? In a way, it's impossible to judge someone on something that we don't know they'll ever do unless they're put in a very extreme situation. I think that were they to get a lawyer and that goes to court, that everyone gets exonerated, because there's no way you can prove.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't necessarily agree that legal justice is true justice. It's all based on what you morally think of an event,
and how your
right,
society is set up as well.
Yeah,
and
what you think is
bad.
acceptable behavior or not acceptable behavior, given the context of the factors involved. So yeah, maybe they would be exonerated in a legal justice system, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with the morality of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're interesting as characters anyway, because, like I said, they are all from Bohemian backgrounds. The actual actors are. They're all from different walks of of dance, and they're creative people. Creative people are very, they're very kind of fucked up people a lot of the time. And people who take things kind of head on, and they're very different to what you might be if you're just working 9 to 5, doing different type of jobs, like a normal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Creative people live their industry, they work their industry, and they don't necessarily fit into society. So I think it's interesting to put those type of people into the scenario where this does happen, because they're already perhaps more exposed, they're more naked to other people's opinions, to what is they find acceptable. There's, like I said, there's all the ideas of sex and how incestuous, not just between those two characters, but in general, this whole thing is because they all have sex with each other and stuff. And this is just stuff that always happens in artistic circles and in anywhere that you're put in close, like a pack of animals. And that's basically what it kind of goes to for me.
Do you think that it's then also not just a general commentary on France, but like a commentary on that kind of world, that creative
I definitely
world?
think there's a hugely bohemian element to this.
Yeah.
Like, there's like trans people in this. There's sort of a pregnant person who's thinking about an abortion. I remember going to see Marina Abramovich do a talk once, and she just brazenly says how many, like, she had loads of abortions because she had to focus on her art. And these people live within this scenario where that becomes more flippant. And obviously Lou isn't feeling that, but there's this idea of that stuff being more free and open, and in France, Bohemia, and all this kind of freedom that France represents, and that artistic nature it has.
I think it's down to personal taste and personal views, how much you extrapolate this group of people to represent a greater group, right? Whether you think it's something to do with the kind of people that practice that profession, whether you think it's a France thing or a human thing or a world thing. Or
he supposedly, he constantly has been on record saying it's just about a group of dancers. It's just about a group of dancers. Apparently the thing about the French flag was just a happy accident that came together on the day as well.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily matter what he thinks.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter what he thinks. But
if anything, if we know anything from David Lynch, it's that the creator just wants to fuck with people sometimes, and aren't gonna like offhandedly say exactly what they meant by this. And he's always like, I Stand Alone is brilliant, and I know you haven't seen it, but that's very French, and I think that's another one where I would believe that it's a critique of French society and certain people in French society. But he's basically said, like, could be anywhere, or this is just a man. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what his intention is. The Frenchness in it is there for all to see, and I think that definitely ties into the fact that this is, I mean, it's built up in a certain way where you see all of these people with all their disparate views. I think anyone would take that to be something to take beyond.
It feels
that group
bigger than what it is, and I probably agree with you that he may be keeping his cards close to his chest himself, because he wants to just put it out and let it be what it is to different people and however they see it and whatever.
Because he hates the fact that this is his least arty movie and people love it most. He wants a movie to be polarizing, and he wants every single movie he makes to be interpretational, ambiguous. People can take their own opinions and take away completely different stories or kind of like politics or point of views from the movie. So I think he's definitely the kind of person that would want to still the fire of that for this particular movie, because this is the one that's least interpretational. Yeah.
Interesting. I like the fact that because they are all kind of dancers and the way it is and how naturalistic it is and everything, that they also lived like 100 meters down the road, and they, after a day of shooting, would go back there and they would all talk about it and debrief, and
Oh, they all lived together, did they?
Yeah,
during
they all lived
filming?
together during the filming, and it was like going to a theatre set. And it was remarked that actually they could spend more time rehearsing and coming up with ideas than they did normally, because just for being one set, they didn't have to take everything down after a day shooting. They could just leave it there and go back the next day. And they apparently all lived in the little cul-de-sac. So it was just, they're all very together in that time and a unit.
Must have been it was like 4 weeks or something, right? The production. It must have been very, very intense.
It was a quick turnaround, definitely intense, but creative and
really, like
freeing.
Lightning in a bottle, creative conditions.
And he wanted some of the best dancers in Paris and in France to do this. And he thought he was going to end up with a more female-centric cast, but ended up with a more male-centric cast. A lot of the background is men, and you'll see that a lot of the best dancers he found were men doing this. Guy played David. He said he was looking for atypical dancers. He was the first one to shoot a video of him dancing. And he said he sent it off like a month before, and then 2 weeks before filming was when he was like, I must have not got it. He got call saying, "Oh, do you want to get on board? You should come on board and do this now." But it's interesting.
Gaspar Noé does that kind of weird casting a lot. The main character in Love, which was his movie before this one, I think 2015. You met him in a nightclub,
really,
just randomly, and made friends with him. And then 4 weeks later, called him up and said, "Do you want to star in my movie?" The guy wasn't even an actor.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
He's like, I'll have sex on camera. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in a way, what you're saying about it being bigger than just that room is definitely that, because the cast were told, go and watch videos of people in the USA going out of their minds on drugs. So that was one of their
the MK Ultra things and that kind of thing.
Just go and watch that. So it does represent more than France, and it represents something more worldwide about drugs and things as well. And I mean, there's all sorts to unpack in there, as you already started to, and alluded to. Yeah,
I mean, it's all interpretational. Did you read the thing about Stanley Kubrick's 2001 that Gaspar said? So basically, he said you wanted to make a psychological drama that was the counterpoint to Stanley Kubrick's 2001. So much so that instead of seeing the apes evolve into humans, Climax is like the humans go back to being apes, going back to their original forces, which is interesting because that's basically what it is, right?
Another interesting thing about that, another interesting thing about that is that the structure is almost backwards as well, because it starts with the end credits, and then ends with the title of the film. So it is almost like the film itself is going backwards. Cool.
Yeah, and it has the kind of midpoint credits as well, where you see
the names
musicians and and so on. Yeah, but all of his movies are weirdly structured, and I love that. Yeah.
Right, Dave. Any thoughts, feelings you want to get out there?
No, other than maybe we can just spotlight the soundtrack. Amazing. Like I didn't recognize every single name, but like lots of like 90s, because it's set in the 90s, right? It's set in 96 or something like that.
Off of a supposed real event, but not really.
Yeah.
Like it was, it's missed. I read some things that said he had a dream about this, and
I could believe
other
that,
ones where he remembers reading a newspaper about it, but nobody can find what the exact event was or whether it ever happened. And,
I like that. I like those sort of tenuous
kind of mystery.
Tenuous things that make you go off on a creative spark.
But at the same time, it's fully believable as a thing that could have happened, even if there's no record of it.
Yeah.
So,
maybe it did all dissolve into stabbing, and
he cleaned it up.
It's too much like a film. No one's going to believe this.
Yeah.
I like the idea that it's kind of vague and may or may not be real, even because he's making it small, like he's not giving too much out about it and letting people
I think it would dilute it a little bit if you had a real
well, he said that he's like, you got to, if it's a real thing, you got to use real names, you got to be respectful, etc. Like,
you've got to kind of have a reason to defer from the actual happening.
Saying it's based on true events could literally mean, I'm basing it on this person who had a bad trip. I'm basing it on my own bad trip of LSD.
Yeah, I went to a club once and saw somebody freak out.
Yeah, or I watched the cast watched a video of people in the US. Based on a true... Technically, everything is based upon a true story because you're not doing anything new. You're just...
Nothing's ever created that isn't out of the human experience.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it might even be as vague as that.
Yeah.
But you're right, the soundtrack is really interesting. Like range of dance music from the 60s.
I really goes that far back.
Yeah,
does it?
well, I think there's Motown in there, there's disco.
Yeah. I think it's incredible the way it holds like a tempo throughout it, and it's powerful when they move out from side of the dance floor and the music is absent, and you get the screams and so on, and then you get back to it.
Yeah.
It's such like a brilliantly composed kind of soundscape that you basically traverse as they're traversing the actual like.
Yeah, you almost feel like the
place itself.
The 25th member of the troupe, almost like the camera is like a character in the world.
The camera is definitely a character.
You're in the world with it. Yeah.
Well, that was a big thing within it when they were rehearsing the dance sequences and things, and how the camera goes through, and that was set up in that way. So they would start at 3:00 in the afternoon, and the first 9 or 10 takes, which was all filmed, the first 9 or 10 takes was literally basically rehearsal, even for the cameraman. Like it wasn't literally just for everyone involved, including like when they have to do the top down, the Wile E. Coyote camera angle, like when they have to do that. That's also rehearsing and being very specific with where he wanted to shoot and what he wanted to shoot. Everything done in that film is very purposeful from a dance perspective and what ends up being in the film. And there's the cast basically say that almost every time it was the last take which they used, which is kind of unusual for a film. You know, you would just take a load and go, oh, that one's better, that one early one's better. But in this, it was like dance. Each performance gets better and more, I don't know, everything just gets a little bit more cohesive as it goes in. So,
and he's not necessarily looking for perfection of the dance, right?
No.
He's looking for what he wants to see as happening right there.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's on the earlier point of the story when they're not on the drugs, you know, it is still supposed to be a rehearsal, and they talk to the woman that organised it all, saying it was good for, 3 days.
3 days,
practice.
yeah.
He doesn't necessarily want to show like the perfect rendition of this dance routine. He wants to show, a believable routine for 3 days and so on. Yeah.
And there's a great special feature on the Blu-ray if anyone gets a chance to look at it. And it's basically where each music segment is dissected.
Really?
And they talk about it, for like 25 minutes, and it goes through what it is, how it influences the film, like how the opening shot is like an old classic Motown song or something, and like it has this openness, and as it goes in, it becomes darker, and as we've said, it does get darker, a lot of these stuff, but also what the music meant in its own context and how it contextualizes the film. So it's really interesting special feature. You could do like a full 2 hours just talking about that. So
yeah, I wish I knew a bit more about music to really get into it.
Yeah, none of us here are music theorists. So.
But I know that,
but I like that Moon is on the soundtrack. Who are the main composers for Hotline Miami, the video game?
Yes,
which has
I know
one of the best soundtracks in all of games.
I did notice that. That was one of the names I recognised. That Daft Punk and Giorgio Moroder.
Rolling Stones.
Moroder's been going. I think they're from the 60s.
Are they from the 60s?
Yeah, but Moroder's like a legend of electronic like compositions.
I know like at least one of the songs was original, right? A song called Sangria that I think plays after the rehearsals are finished, or it plays when the nightmare sequence starts. I can't remember, but it's called Sangria. It's composed by one of the guys from Daft Punk, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah.
Anything else from you, Dave? Do you want to say any final words for yourself?
Yeah, I fucking love it. Like I think it's a goddamn masterpiece. Like I really love it. I love talking about it. I love watching it. I love rewatching it. I really enjoyed rewatching it this time. Like I said at the beginning, I'd recommend it to everybody to watch once. It's not going to be for everybody. It's not an easy watch. It's actually a very challenging watch.
Yeah, some people might watch it and not think it's a horror movie at all. Some people might, me, might watch it and think it's the scariest horror movie there is. So,
but it'll be, in my opinion, an experience that you'll never forget either way. And for that alone, I'd recommend it. And
I think it's like, in a way, it's scary because it's like you're trapped. It's almost like being paralyzed in some senses because you're in this.
Yeah, building. It's this thing about like being you're like
stuck in your own mind.
You're an unwilling.
Participant,
like voyeur, like you're a fly on the wall, but you can't leave, and you're just
not even to us, but the characters themselves. If you go inside their heads and stuff, how frightening and crazy it must be that they're on this trip they didn't want to be on. And it's like you're paralyzed to do what you're going to do. You're destined to do something in a way that you don't want to do or that you would hold back from, because the choice in your life has been taken out by someone to eat someone evil. And it's like, you're stuck, you're gone. Like, it's paralysis in some respects. It's in this place. Where can you go? It's snowing outside. You'll freeze to death. Like, there's nothing to do but be in that place.
Yeah, you're desperate for safety, right? Like,
but it doesn't exist.
It's that kind of thing where people who are in immense pain, or they've suffered something completely traumatic, they want to go see their mom, or they want to go to somewhere where they, like, even regressive as a child felt as a safe place.
Yeah.
Like, they want to go talk to their mom, they want to go to their childhood home, they want to feel somewhere that they're actually safe. And in this world, they can't do that.
Yeah.
There's no way to do that. They have to be there throughout the nightmare.
There's no breathing space until the doors open and an outside entity enters in, like the fire.
Yeah, and like white angelic light almost coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like the end, and then the audience can breathe.
Yeah.
And then those who are surviving.
But the thing is that, like, because the credits, sorry to interrupt your flow, but like, because the credits are at the beginning,
Not though.
And then it ends.
What's that?
Huh?
Sorry, I interrupted your flow.
Oh, okay.
He's a flow terrorist.
Yeah. Like, you don't get to come down at the end because there's no credits. It just you see, you get the reveal of who did it, which in my opinion is really nice that you gave us that.
Yeah.
And then it just shows climax, and then there's no credits, no nothing. Then the film just ends.
Yeah,
it's
I was quite surprised by
you
that.
don't get like 10 minutes of credits to be like, okay, this is what, to come down from it.
Yeah, you get the silence of the movie being over to
and you're
resolve
like,
in your mind.
Right.
What it
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I technically might have preferred the movie if they didn't so unambiguously reveal who the person that had spiked it was.
I don't know, really. Maybe there'd be a whole nother subreddit, wouldn't there? Of, like,
But there already is a lot of people, because I was looking it up, debating and arguing against that it was Psyche. There was a lot of people arguing that it was the brother, to use it as an excuse to get with the sister. There was a lot of people arguing for other characters, like motivations, why they would want to do it. Because I mean, these people are acting basically on what they right deep down inside themselves want. And so it's quite easy to argue that they would
want the barriers down to let these things happen.
To excuse it, to allow it to happen. Yeah.
It's an interesting theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final words from yourself, Mike? Anything you want to say?
I just think, especially that end 20 minutes or so, is one of the best visual representations of just like hell or hell on earth. Realistic, kind of visceral, exactly where you don't want to be in your life, or the situation you don't want to be in. But
with no supernatural elements whatsoever, like completely grounded in our world. But a brilliant representation of hell.
And visually spectacular throughout. The use of basically the French colours of red, blue and white, particularly the reds towards the end, are very iconic, very memorable to me. I think the sense of kind of dread and like foreboding, unsettling atmosphere throughout, because of the sound design, is incredible. I think it's just a great movie and everybody should watch it. So
awesome. I was just reading up as you're saying this as well. I was reading up about the release of the film. Oh, it was at Cannes Film Festival, but
he rushed it, didn't he, to finish for the festival?
Yeah, well, it worked because it's become a bit of a cult film now. But I've just seen there was a limited stock of 100 VHS copies of the film.
Oh, cool.
And I was just looking on eBay. Guess how much, Dave, it costs you to buy one of these in dollars?
You might have to save up.
I can see.
Yeah, I can see.
I'm going to say $800.
It's close, but it's not the one.
How much?
Over 1,000. 1,170. That's US, or approximately £922.49.
Maybe I should have guessed in pounds.
In very good condition. If you guessed in pounds, you'd have been all right. But that's kind of a cool retro feeling to a film, isn't it?
That'd be cool to get that on the set, Mike. So you get saved.
Cool. Well, I need to buy any VHSs first, but yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this trip. Yeah.
Heyo.
He's been waiting the whole podcast for that one.
I just came up with it.
Bullshit.
Yeah, like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you think of this film, and give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
We do.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for listening or watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.